Right now, somewhere in your city, someone is standing at a funeral, not knowing what to do with their hands. They fold them. Unfold them. Look at the ground. It feels awkward, almost scripted. But the discomfort you feel around death today is new. Strange, even. Because for most of human history, death wasn't hidden away. It was handled. Together. Out loud. So what did ancient humans actually do when someone in the group died? Not what you'd expect. Not a quiet, solitary grief. Something far more physical, far more communal, and far stranger than the version we've inherited. Start with the body itself. Archaeologist Paul Pettit, who has spent years studying the earliest burial evidence, has documented deliberate burials going back over 100,000 years. Bodies placed carefully. Sometimes curled into a resting position. Sometimes with red ochre pigment covering the skin. Sometimes surrounded by tools, shells, or flowers, based on pollen traces found at sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq. This wasn't accidental. Someone knelt down. Someone arranged the body with intention. Someone decided this moment mattered enough to leave a mark that would outlast them by tens of thousands of years. Why bother? A body doesn't need ochre. It doesn't need flowers. Survival doesn't demand any of it. Here's the strange part. Burial rituals may not have been primarily for the dead at all. They were for the living. Anthropologist Ellen Basso and others studying grief across cultures have long noted that structured rituals give a shocked, overwhelmed group something to do with their hands and their bodies while their minds catch up to what just happened. Grief without structure spirals. Grief with structure moves forward, one small action at a time. Dig. Arrange. Cover. Mark the place. Think about your own instinct the last time something devastating happened. You probably wanted to do something. Bring food. Clean a house. Make phone calls. Anything but sit still with the feeling. That restlessness is old. It's the same instinct that had your ancestors digging a hole with sharpened sticks and bare hands instead of simply walking away. There's a deeper layer too, and it has to do with memory itself. Psychologist and memory researcher Elizabeth Loftus has shown how fragile and reconstructive human memory really is. Left alone, memories drift, blur, and fade fast. But shared rituals anchor memory in a way solitary thought never can. When a group repeats the same actions, tells the same stories about the person who died, and marks the same physical location again and again, they're not just mourning. They're building a memory the whole group holds together. A memory too large and too repeated for any single person to lose. This might explain something curious about ancient burial sites. Many weren't visited once and abandoned. Evidence from sites across Europe and the Middle East shows people returning to the same graves repeatedly, sometimes over generations. Remarking them. Adding new objects. Some researchers believe these repeat visits function almost like a living archive, a place where the group's shared history physically lived in the ground, visited and reinforced instead of written down. And this raises an uncomfortable question. What happens to that function when it disappears? Modern grief is, in many ways, an isolated experience. A person takes a few days off work. Maybe attends one service. Then they're expected to return, mostly on their own, to a normal schedule while carrying something that hasn't finished processing. There's no repeated communal action. No group returning again and again to hold the memory collectively. The weight that used to be distributed across dozens of hands now rests almost entirely on one person's shoulders. Sociologist Tony Walter, who studies how death and mourning have changed across history, has argued that industrialized societies effectively privatized death. It moved from the home, the village, the shared fire, into hospitals, funeral homes, and brief, scheduled ceremonies. Efficient, yes. But it stripped away much of the repeated physical ritual that once did the psychological work of processing loss over time. You can actually feel the mismatch if you pay attention. Ask yourself honestly. When was the last time you were expected to grieve on a schedule? a funeral, then back to normal by Monday. Meanwhile, something ancient inside you is still operating on the old rhythm. The one that expects weeks, not days. Repetition, not a single event. Company, not solitude. This is likely part of why grief so often resurfaces unexpectedly, months or even years later. A song. A smell. An anniversary date nobody else remembers. Your ancestors would have processed loss through action, spread across a community, across seasons, across repeated visits to a marked place. You're often asked to process the same depth of loss in a single afternoon, largely alone, then return to your desk the next morning as if your nervous system got the memo. It usually didn't. There's something worth sitting with in the ochre and the flowers found in those ancient graves. They tell you that even tens of thousands of years ago, before written language, before permanent settlements, before almost everything you'd call civilization, humans already understood that loss needed a physical outlet. That grief wasn't meant to be carried silently and alone. It was meant to be carried together, through your hands, through repeated action, through a place you could return to. So the next time you find yourself unsure what to do with your hands at a funeral, or restless in the days after losing someone, know that the discomfort isn't a personal failure to grieve correctly. It's an old, patient instinct, still asking for what it always asked for. Not silence. Not a single scheduled goodbye. Something to do. Somewhere to return. Someone beside you while you do it. Right now, somewhere in your city, someone is standing at a funeral, not knowing what to do with their hands. Maybe the answer was never to know. Maybe the answer